All right. Okay, so you guys should all be getting the recording little announcement. So welcome everybody. My name is Kim Onimus. I am the Workforce Development and Research Coordinator here at Rhode Island Sea Grant, and I'm joined online by Alan Desbonnet. He is the Assistant Director for Rhode Island Sea Grant. And we wanted to host this webinar and a series of webinars about the Knauss Fellowship in 2024 to kind of provide an overview of the fellowship and then some other informational sessions as students start to develop their applications or if they choose to apply. And if you have any trouble hearing me or anything like that, or if I'm glitchy, just let me know. I should be good to go, but it is kind of crappy weather out today. So let me skip ahead. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I wanted to give a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start by talking about what is Sea Grant. That's a great question. Talk about who we are, what we do. Then we're going to go into the Knauss Marine Policy Fellowship, the 2024 fellowship, what the fellowship is, along with how to apply, a timeline for your applications, and the process for selection. I'll provide you with some resources, and then we'll go into, if you do choose to apply for this fellowship, what do your next steps look like? What are some resources that you can use to help form your application? And then we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end. So it might not take the whole hour. We'll try to keep it tight. So we're going to start by talking about what is Sea Grant? What is Rhode Island Sea Grant? Sea Grant can be a little bit confusing for those of us who are unfamiliar with it. But Sea Grant is essentially, it's a partnership between the federal government and universities in coastal or Great Lakes states across the US and US territories. So there's kind of two parts. There's a central National Sea Grant College Program Office, which is located in Silver Springs, Maryland. It's a program of NOAA. And then there are 34 university-based programs across the country. And there's a little bit of feedback going here. So there are 34 university-based programs across the country. So Rhode Island Sea Grant, we're housed, we live at the University of Rhode Island. Our offices are located at the Bay campus and the Graduate School of Oceanography, but we work with researchers, institutions, and universities across Rhode Island and communities across Rhode Island. We're not URI based in that sense at all. And our role, and the role of all Sea Grant programs across the country, is to promote environmental stewardship and long-term economic development within local communities, local coastal communities. And this can be reflected in Rhode Island Sea Grant's overall mission, which is written here, and that's to improve the understanding and management of Rhode Island's coastal marine ecosystems to foster vibrant, healthy coastal ecosystems, economies, and marine environments that are resilient in the face of change. So a bit of a mouthful, but we do a lot of work in a lot of different communities around the state. And we kind of reach this mission through 3 different ways. So we do it by funding research. So we provide funding for new and continuing science that's relevant to local coastlines, communities, and economies. Some of you as graduate students may have worked on Sea Grant funded projects during your time here. And we also use funding to support research fellows who work with PIs on those research and funded projects. We also have a large focus on extension and research and outreach. We work closely with the URI Coastal Resources Center, which houses our extension team. And they work closely with members of local communities on relevant coastal issues like aquaculture, coastal resilience, and offshore energy. And our third focus is workforce development. In workforce development, we work within other programs and within our other programs to train a diverse workforce in marine science, policy, engineering, and law. Our workforce development portfolios include training opportunities for different careers and also fellowship opportunities like this Knauss Fellowship. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So for those who may not be familiar, who haven't had a chance to read the announcement yet, the Knauss Fellowship, it was first initiated in 1979, and it aims to offer students a unique and professional experience to get hands-on training and work in the federal government on marine policy issues. So it's aimed and targeted at graduate students who are interested in national policy issues related to ocean, coastal, and Great Lake resources. It's a 12-month experience. It would start, in this case, in February 2024 and end in January of 2025. It's based in Washington, D.C. And as of this year, I believe almost all opportunities are in person and located in the DC area. And if you are selected as a fellow, there are both executive branch and legislative branch fellowship positions that are available to you. And if you're selected as a Knauss Fellow, you'll undergo a placement process, after which you're placed in either an executive or legislative office, and you'd be working closely with a mentor in that office on marine policy related projects and initiatives. And if this is something that you're interested in working for, or working within governments or the federal government, this fellowship is really valuable, and it can open a lot of doors and provide you with skills and experiences that are really valuable to job recruiters. And it's a successful program. So approximately half of all Knauss alumni go on to work for the federal government after the fellowship. And Rhode Island, we've had a pretty good track record. We've had more than 80 fellows participate in this program, participate as Knauss Fellows since the program was first initiated in 1979. So for the 2024 fellowship, these are just kind of overall details about the fellowship. In terms of eligibility, to be eligible for this fellowship, you have to be enrolled in a graduate program between fall 2022 and February 16th, 2023. So if you're graduating in December of this year, you are still eligible for this fellowship. Your graduate degree, and if you're graduating in the spring or later, you're still eligible. You just have to have been a graduate student within this time frame, fall 2022 and mid-February. The graduate degree must be awarded through an accredited institution of higher learning. And in this case, it has to be in Rhode Island. If you have a degree in marine policy from the University of Massachusetts, that's great, but you need to apply through a Massachusetts program, not Rhode Island Sea Grant. So it's Rhode Island graduate students. And the students, this is kind of obvious, they must have an interest in ocean, coastal, and Great Lakes resource and policy decisions, because that's going to be what the fellowship is. You're going to be working on these types of issues. The fellowship, as I mentioned before, will begin on February 1st, 2024. So not this coming year, but the year after. And both US and non-US citizens are eligible to apply. You do not have to be a US national to apply for this fellowship. And I will take any questions at the end of the thing, because I cannot see if you've raised your hands. So this is a table that's going to outline how this federal funding award is broken down. And I wanted to include this because it can be a little confusing and it can be a little misleading, because this award on paper is valued at $90,500 for 2024. But the actual funding that's available to you or to the fellows can be broken up a little differently. So, like I said, the award is valued at $90,500. $68,000 of that $90,000 is allocated for stipend. So that would be your gross income pre-tax for the year of the fellowship. This next line says discretionary budget is a $5,000 discretionary budget. This is funding that's held by the university, so it would be held by URI. That can be used to fund various costs associated with your fellowship. So that would be things like moving costs, travel and attendance at different conferences, trainings, college or university tuition, things like that, that are associated with the success of your fellowship, but they're not directly part of your income. So those two starred rows, those are the two rows. That's the money that you're kind of guaranteed to have access to as a fellow. The next two rows are kind of dependent on National Sea Grant Office activities and your ultimate placement within whatever host office you end up working with, should you be selected as a fellow. Executive offices, so I'm looking at this bottom line here. Executive offices can provide up to $15,000 for fellow related travel and training. So this isn't necessarily your money, but it's funding that's, allocated to you and that you may have access to cover costs associated with your fellowship, depending on which office you're placed in. And this is only for executive offices. So for example, I was a Knauss Fellow in 2021. I was working with the National Science Foundation's Office of Polar Programs. I had this $15,000 in my budget because I was supposed to go to Paris for the Antarctic Treaty in 2021. I didn't end up going, but that money existed for me to go if it was held in person, which it wasn't, and I didn't get to go. But, you know, other fellows in other offices, which may not need to do that kind of travel, would not have that $15,000 at their disposal for those purposes. The placement week travel, that $2,500, that's money that's held back by the National Sea Grant Office to cover costs associated with placement week, which we can talk about later on. Again, not necessarily guaranteed funding, but it's funding that's considered part of the overall package. And again, I'll be happy to answer any questions about this at the end. Okay, so if you made it this far and you're interested in applying, all applications will be submitted through eSeaGrant, which is our online reporting system, reporting and proposal system. And in order to start your application, you need to be given access to eSeaGrant by an administrator. So that's either me or Alan. And to be given access so that you can, you know, start putting together and submitting your application, you should reach out to me via email, provide me with your name, email address, and also a phone number would be helpful to reach you. And I will take that information. I'll create an account for you, which will allow you to enter into eSeaGrant, enter into the site, and to begin kind of submitting your application. You can start putting together the pieces of your application without access, but you will need to access eSeaGrant to actually submit the final package. Just be sure that when you do submit your application, you actually click to submit it before the deadline, which is February 16th. Once you submit your application, you can edit it up until that February 16th deadline. So we always tell people, you know, submit just to be on the safe side. You can always go in and change things later on. So talking about the application timeline and process. So as I just mentioned, applications are due to Rhode Island Sea Grant through that eSeaGrant portal no later than 5 p.m. on February 16th, 2023. And Sea Grant staff are available to assist in the reviewing of draft material, so draft applications, up until February 10th. We won't be reviewing any documents after February 10th. So don't come to me on February 14th asking me to review your personal statement, because I'm going to say, no, I have way too much going on and I can't help you. And as I mentioned, they must be submitted in eSeaGrant. After those applications are submitted, all candidates will be interviewed by a Rhode Island Sea Grant selection panel. So that will be a panel of individuals who will review applications and provide scoring. And the interviews are part of that scoring process. We don't have exact dates for when these interviews will be scheduled, but they will probably be scheduled within the first week of March. So just keep that in mind if you end up applying. The selection panel will review applications, and then we will select candidates that we will pass on to the National Sea Grant Office for kind of national review. So it's a similar process, just at the national level. And students who apply through Rhode Island Sea Grant will be notified around March 10th if their application was selected. So we can submit up to 6 applicants to forward to the National Sea Grant review. And this kind of timeline at the bottom kind of shows you the general outline of how it's going to work. You'll submit your application, we'll conduct the interviews, we'll notify you if your application will be pushed along to the national office. It will then go under national review, and then the finalists will be selected. If you are selected as a finalist, you will be informed of that decision by the National Sea Grant Office in June, early to mid-June 2023. And again, the fellowship will be expected to start no earlier and no later than February 1st, 2024. So you have that kind of gap period between June and February. So keep that in mind if you do end up applying to this, that there will be that kind of open period between when you're accepted and when the fellowship begins. Application components. We are going to do an entire information session on putting together your application. So I just have one slide right now that kind of highlights the main parts. All of this is available online. I'll provide you with links at the end. The main components are your CV or your resume. This is not to exceed 2 pages. And please do me a favor and do not include any personal contact information on your CV. I'm just going to have to redact it. So you won't include anything like email addresses, phone numbers, mailing address. None of that goes onto the application or onto the resume. In this case, it's not like a general resume. The personal education and career development, also known as the personal statement, less than 1,500 words total, and it's broken into 3 separate subsections. More information of that on how that can be crafted is available on Inside Sea Grant. Again, I'll provide you with the link at the end. You have to include a write-up on relevant coursework and future plans. That's a 1-page write-up to include what you plan to work on or accomplish in the time between basically submitting your application and when the fellowship would start that next February. You need to submit 2 letters of recommendation, including one from a faculty member who works closely with you. So somebody like an academic advisor or somebody that you've worked closely with as a graduate student. And you also need to include your graduate and undergraduate transcripts. And it's okay if these are unofficial transcripts. So you don't have to worry about ordering an official transcript from your undergraduate institution. I know that can be kind of a pain. Okay. So those are the main application components. Like I said, in our next information session, we'll go into way more detail about what these components look like, what they shouldn't look like, things like that. But this is kind of an introduction to what you're going to need to submit your application. So next step, like I said before, you want to contact me. My email is incorrectly spelled right here, but I'll provide it to you in the chat. And reach out to me, especially if you have any questions about your eligibility. We'll determine your eligibility, and then I will work with you to give you access to the EC Grant portal. Like I said, provide me with your name, email address, and best phone number. Also, you want to check out Inside Sea Grant's website for prospective fellows. They have a lot of resources. They also have the full application guide, including the scoring criteria that we're going to use at the Rhode Island Sea Grant level, and also that's going to be used at the national level. I strongly recommend that you attend any webinars that are held by the National Sea Grant Office. I know they had like office hours yesterday, and they may have a few more things like that over the next couple of weeks. So keep your eye out for that. And as I mentioned, the Inside Sea Grant website has really great resources for prospective fellows, things like what other fellows have worked on in the past, what alumni are doing now, and then also just tips for crafting your application, which can be really valuable. As I mentioned, our next seminar, we're going to have one on developing and building your application. That's going to be December 13th from 4 to 5 p.m. And then we'll just kind of have a more general casual office hours and Q&A in mid-January, so about a month before your application is due, for any kind of last minute questions or any information that you want about the fellowship or anything like that. And I can also answer some of those questions now. Again, here is a list of resources for constructing your application. Like I said, Inside Sea Grant website. Also, feel free to use URI or your local university's writing center for help with the resume. They've got a lot of good resources for that. And if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to contact me, and I can hopefully give you some good advice with probably some help from Alan. Okay. That is my spiel. Alan, did I miss anything? Are you even still here? That needs to be covered.
I am still here. And no, I think you hit all of the high points that need to be addressed, and just see if people have questions.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I can't see any of you. So yeah, I am happy to answer any questions. Does anybody have anything? You can just raise your hand or unmute or anything like that. And I'll put my email in the chat too, so you have an actual one that's spelled right.
Hey, Kim, thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to do this. Super quick question, and maybe it's in the weeds. CV or resume, is there a preference? I know when I was applying to grad school, it was everyone wanted a CV, but then for most government jobs, they want the federal resume format. Do you have an intuition on which one I should be updating right now?
I mean, they call it a CV, but I feel like in reality, it's more of a resume because it is only the 2 pages.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you'd have publications and stuff like that, anything you think is relevant, but yeah, whatever you think kind of will highlight what you want to highlight in 2 pages, for sure.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I would just add to that, Kim, that what they should do for the resume is look at the Knauss announcement, because it pretty much outlines what they should be putting in a resume when you're looking at how they're going to rate that. So it's worth looking at that before you just go ahead and buff up that resume and think, done. And then you're going to go look at that and say, ooh, I got to start all over again.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and then Rafid, you have your hand up.
Hi, thanks again for the time today. Just quick clarifying question. I'm not actually applying till next year, but you mentioned that you needed to be a URI student, which I am obviously, but I live in Connecticut. So would I be able to apply through the Connecticut Sea Grant as well, or do I just pick one? Obviously, being URI, I would do URI.
Yeah, so it's not just URI, it's any Rhode Island institution. So any, you could be at Roger Williams, you could be at Brown, anybody who's getting their graduate degree in Rhode Island would apply through the state program that they're getting the degree. So even though you live in Connecticut, you would be applying with Rhode Island Sea Grant and Rhode Island Sea Grant only. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah, yes, definitely. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? I know I kind of rapid fired through that PowerPoints. Okay. All right. Well, what we'll do is, as I said, this is going to be, it is being recorded. It better still be, yeah. This is being recorded. I'm going to have it put on the Rhode Island Sea Grant website this week, hopefully. And if you have any questions, if you start kind of going through that application packet and that information and you see something that you're not unsure of, or you have any questions, just reach out to me. And like I said before, reach out to me as well if you decide like, yes, this is something I want to pursue and I will like to apply. Send me an email with your contact information and I will hopefully get you into EC Grant. I'm telling the Coastal Management Fellows too, hopefully by the end of next week. We'll see how things go on Monday. But yeah, so yeah, any other last minute questions or I will let you go a full 50 minutes early, 40 minutes. All right, thanks guys. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the semester. Good luck.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, bye Alan, thank you.
Bye.